In football, some are willing to do anything to achieve their dreams of becoming a professional player, having a long, honorable, and productive career, and representing their country in international tournaments. Thousands of young talents are willing to put in all the effort and sacrifice to achieve this. Some of them don't hesitate to cheat if necessary. That's the topic we're going to address today, which is a major focus in current football news: players lying about their ages. You've probably heard of the case of Wilfried Nathan Douala, this young Cameroonian player, who isn't as young as he seems, and who is in the midst of a storm after serious doubts about his true identity. But who is he really? What are the details of this story? And why is the Cameroonian Football Federation seriously threatened by this fact? A Wilfried Nathan Douala is Cameroonian and, at first glance, possesses all the qualities that destined him for a beautiful career in a top-level club in Europe. Praised as a product of his generation, he was selected to represent his country during the last African Nations Cup. At 17, Wilfried Nathan Douala has a promising future, and his talent will one day lead him to play for a La Liga or Premier League club. That's what everyone thought until a few months ago. However, recent revelations have tarnished this image. This young prodigy would have a dual identity and would have lied about his age. His real name would be Alexander Bardelli, and he wouldn't be 17. In fact, he would be much older. This news has shaken the Cameroonian sports community, and, as we'll see, the case goes beyond national borders. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated case. In Africa, in particular, there is a common but taboo procedure that benefits players and institutions: age manipulation to gain a competitive advantage. Youth is synonymous with longevity in a career and attracts the interest of European clubs. Wilfried Douala's case leads us to reflect on this practice and its consequences. It's 2024, and the name Wilfried Nathan Douala is known to all who follow the Cameroonian Championship. Amateurs and experts agree that he is a prodigy who will shine locally before transferring to renowned clubs in Europe. On the Transfermarkt website, which is a reference for information about players worldwide, we see that he was born on May 15, 2006. He is a 17-year-old Cameroonian, plays as a midfielder, stands at 1.72 m tall, and has a market value of €100,000. He began his training at a local club's academy and caught the attention of some recruiters. Thanks to Dream Agency management, he signed with the Cameroonian club Victoria United. Wilfried Nathan Douala is seen as a classic midfielder, quick, with quality passing and game intelligence. He has an early talent that did not go unnoticed by coach Rigobert Song, who called him up for the African Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast. However, Douala did not play a single minute in this competition. This wouldn't be a problem as he's only 17 years old, but does he really have 17 years? There have been rumors and doubts for a long time about his real age. An investigation was officially opened to clarify this. One of the first clues about his true identity is a distinctive scar and characteristic tattoos found on another player, Alexander Bardelli, who is 23 years old. This raised serious suspicions, and the use of facial recognition software only increased the doubts. The investigation revealed that Wilfried Douala and Alexander Bardelli are the same person. Wilfried, or rather, Bardelli, not only changed his name but also reduced his age by several years, precisely 6 years. Another piece of evidence is the existence of photos of Wilfried from 2016 on social media. If he really were 17 years old now, he would have been only 9 years old in those photos, but he looks much older. Even before the scandal broke, FECAFOOT, the Cameroonian Football Federation, was alerted by revelations from the newspaper Le Monde Afrique. The organization, already criticized for its sometimes opaque management, should have reacted, but it did not. The federation was aware of doubts about Douala's real age, and yet he was called up. The credibility of the national team and the verification systems are seriously in question. Finally, FECAFOOT reacted radically, announcing the temporary disqualification of 61 players for age fraud. Yes, 61 players, because Douala is not the only one. The problem of age falsification is of great magnitude, and that is why Cameroonian football faces potentially severe repercussions that will affect both the national team and the young promising players involved in these scandals. For Wilfried Nathan Douala, the personal consequences could be serious. In the best-case scenario, he could be suspended for 6 games, which is an automatic sanction applied to those found guilty of age manipulation. However, if the player faces charges of forgery and use of false documents, the situation is different. This crime could result in legal proceedings in Cameroon. The gravity of the charges could lead to a suspension of several years and a significant fine. But what is the risk for the Cameroonian national team? Well, the indomitable Lions are not immune to the consequences of this case. Remember that he was selected to compete in the CAN, and even though Douala did not participate in the game, he was still registered according to the rules of the Confederation of African Football. If the investigation reveals clear fraud, the national team could be excluded from the next 2 editions of the African Cup of Nations. Such a scenario would be a severe blow to Cameroonian football. You're probably wondering why all these players falsify their ages. This is where the subject becomes really interesting. Firstly, it's important to know that it's not just a minority of bold or ill-advised young players who resort to these dishonest manipulations. In fact, it's a very common practice. One could say that players who don't lie about their ages are a tiny minority. Many great African names recognize the extent of this phenomenon. To understand the motivations behind this practice, one must put oneself in the shoes of young African talents who, most of the time, live in precarity and are willing to do anything to realize their dreams. The social and economic pressure is stronger than in other continents. In football, the younger you are, the more valued and the greater the chance of realizing the dream of becoming a professional player. Professional clubs, especially in Europe, are constantly on the lookout for young talents to develop. This demand strongly encourages agents to lower the ages of players on documents, thereby increasing their chances of being recruited. However, this would not be possible without the complicity of institutions. This involves governance and corruption problems on a large scale. Many former players, like Jiren Enda, a former Senegalese international, have admitted to reducing their ages to become professionals. In Senegal, for example, 99% of players are said to have reduced their ages. The risk is not only the possible severe sanctions that players face when lying about their ages. By doing so, they end up unable to meet the high expectations and cannot sustain their careers in the long term. Real aging inevitably catches up with them. It's a spiral of lies that not only harms sports competitiveness but also discredits African football institutions. Fortunately, some voices are rising to call for change. Some clubs, like ASCC Mimosas from Ivory Coast, are using advanced technologies to verify the ages of their players, showing awareness and a willingness to reform. If African football wants to, age fraud can be completely eliminated. African sports institutions have already begun to impose stricter controls, such as MRI exams to estimate age, making it harder to manipulate information. However, there are practical and financial challenges to overcome to generalize these devices. An investigation last year identified structural flaws in the civil registration systems of some African countries, including Cameroon and the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to the investigation, an alarming number of African players are falsifying their ages on their passports, facilitated by archaic and easily falsifiable civil records. Document trafficking benefits clubs, players, and intermediaries. Great stars of African football, like Samuel Eto'o, have been suspected of lying about their ages. It is hoped that in the future, these dubious practices that harm African sport will gradually disappear. Frankly, African football does not need this to shine. There are plenty of talents, developing infrastructures, national teams that often thrill in international competitions, and African legends who have left their mark on the biggest clubs and competitions. To achieve this, only reliable and transparent mechanisms need to be implemented. We hope you enjoyed and learned something new. If so, don't forget to like and leave your comment in the section below. To watch content as good as this, click on the video that appears on your screen.